Last night, I watched a video by Jello Impact where he was detailing some of the larger complaints that have been leveled against Hoyoverse and specifically Genshin Impact following primarily the 6.6 live stream. But I think a lot of this has been festering for quite a while and has finally started to bubble over the surface, as it seems like many players are just outraged right now. They care deeply about these problems, and I could tell that he cared deeply about a lot of them, and good on him. That's the game that he primarily covers, and so it's good on him to actually not just shill for Genshin and try to be truthful and frank about some of the stuff that we're seeing in the gacha sphere and Genshin Impact's role in the gacha sphere, which is changing. And that's going to be one of the major focuses of my video, which is kind of a, I don't want to call it even a response to his video, but I felt like he kind of teed up some important things, and I kind of wanted to just put some meat on that bone a little bit. And I think comparing it to Wuthering Waves, which obviously has been done a million times in a million other videos, but I think at this moment in 2026, comparing it to Wuthering Waves provides more context, I think, and more contrast, right? The contrast is stark. It really is, and I love both of these games so much. They were my first two forays into gacha. I started with Genshin, and then about, I don't know, 9 months later, I started playing Wuthering Waves, and they're still two of my favorites, right? And so I think it will be interesting to take a look at why Genshin is receiving the backlash that it is. So let's get into that. Before we do, please remember to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel, and go over and follow me on Twitch as well. Same handle at real_alprazoman. And there is a new Rumble channel, and that's rumble/user/alprazoman. All right, let's get into it. Thank you guys for supporting the channel. Okay, so we're looking at these top complaints that we saw with Genshin. Well, not even necessarily all of the verbatim same complaints that he detailed in his video. I want to look at where we can compare these two games. So one of the things he did mention was the lack of quality. Well, he said the lack of quality 4 stars for starters, although I would say that's also the case in Wuthering Waves, and actually in many ways, many ways, because Genshin has a lot more 4-star characters. So this is a thing I would say actually Genshin has done that part a little bit better. You have characters like Bennett, Sucrose, Zhangling to a lesser degree, Xingqiu, Aino, and there are several other characters on that list that are really good and usable 4-star characters that I use. I use one of them every Stygian Onslaught, sometimes more than one. I use at least one of them every Spiral Abyss, I would say. Maybe one on each team on either side. And so they're still being used in endgame content, which is where we measure the meta, right? Iluga, a new quality 4-star character. And so I do think when he was lamenting the fact that Genshin doesn't have more. Now, he did say universal, so Iluga is new but not universal, right? Really only works on a couple teams. But overall, you still have Bennett, who really will not be dethroned. You have Sucrose, who absolutely will not be dethroned, it seems, for a long time. And then you have this new character, Prune, coming out who looks really, really good, actually. That's going to be a 4-star. Meanwhile, in Wuthering Waves, you only have Mortefi and Sanhua. And you can find some uses for a couple other characters, but mostly it's those two. So I will say, what Wuthering Waves has done way better, though, and it just cannot be overstated how important it is that the universally accepted best support that can be used on almost any team. I mean, literally almost any team. And sometimes you're taking a little bit of a hit in damage output, but not much. In most teams, she is best in slot, and on almost all teams, she's usable. So Shorekeeper being given out for free to new players makes anyone be able to jump in and play the game and start kicking ass right away. I can't overstate how important that is. If you look at Wuthering Waves, all those characters that I just named are 4-star units that back in the early days of the game, you would be getting many, many copies of very quickly because there weren't as many characters. So the 4-stars were, there's 3 4-stars on every banner. So kind of like in Wuthering Waves, it's super easy to acquire every single 4-star unit very early in the game because there's just not that many for them to choose from to put on the banners. In Genshin, Bennett might not be on banner for another 6 months or something. So if you start playing Genshin right now and you don't have access to Bennett or Sucrose or Singsho, you're kind of cooked, really. I mean, you're going to have to spend money right away to get some dedicated supports and get 5-star, limited character support options. You're not even going to have all the standard characters for a while. And in Wuthering Waves, at a minimum, they just kind of hand you on a silver platter the best character probably in the game still to this day for free. And so that is just super valuable and cannot be overstated. And he was talking about how the days are long gone of the universal supports in Genshin Impact overall, let alone being given to you for free in the beginning of the game. But yeah, Kazuha, he's done. Kazuha's gone. Even Jalonin is now kind of, she's taken a back seat. She's still usable on a lot of teams, but is no longer a just readily accepted top tier universal support. We kind of thought maybe Columbina would be that when we didn't know a lot about her kit, but she's actually not. So anyways, yeah, so that's that. Meta characters, and we're talking about new meta characters that can literally solo content. So this kind of could be this could piggyback off the last point that you have a character like Hiyuki that just debuts and people are soloing TOA with her at S0 R1. And that is amazing for free to play and low spenders. That's a wonderful deal because you can get her and you can get Shorekeeper and you don't really even need to have Chisa. Chisa would maximize her potential, but if people are soloing her in TOA at S0 R1, if you have Shorekeeper, then you're doing even better, right? And then you just got to kind of find a third slot, just a decent sub DPS somewhere in there in your account, and you're golden. And so this is why people are starting to largely migrate over to games like Wuthering Waves because it's just more fun. It's no fun to play a game when you can't even clear the end game modes. End game is such a big part of these games. Unless you're a teenager that just likes to run around and explore, and I love to do that too, but I want to be able to clear end game content. That's important. It's an important part of why we play these games. And so if, especially the most challenging end game modes like Stygian Onslaught, if you can't clear it because you don't even have 3 quality teams, then, let alone 2 to do the Abyss, in this game, you can literally solo one side of it with one character. And then you just need a couple other teams, and they don't even have to be super meta to get the job done. So the barrier to entry is a lot lower. The pull economy, which he talked about, and the pull economy is just higher overall in Wuthering Waves. We know this, that even in light patches, the pull economy is always around 1 5-star, and a lot of times more, once 50-50. So you're not going to be guaranteed get a character every patch, but it is a lot more likely in this game than in Genshin Impact. The math just doesn't math for Genshin, unfortunately, especially when you throw in how pathetic the weapon banner is, but I have that information a little bit later. The strength of early sequence nodes versus constellations is a huge deal. I'm a person who has vertical investment on both of my accounts, and I can tell you that if I were to line up the best characters on my account, on average, what I need to achieve max results, meaning clearing the most difficult endgame content, you don't necessarily need any of it. Many people do just fine with S0. And when I say clear, if we're talking about just Asterite and Primo Gems, then yes, you don't need cons for any of that necessarily, unless you're like, you know, really bad at the game. But like, I would say on average, a C6 character for me in Genshin is probably about as solid as an S3 character in Wuthering Waves, meaning like S3 Imith equals C6 Nefer. There are a couple exceptions to that. My Linnea is C2 and is like doing over 1 million damage. They kind of broke the game with that character, but those characters are rare in Genshin Impact. My C0 Mawika, I struggle with Mawika, but my C0 Mawika is like dwarfed by my C2 Linnea. My S3 Imith absolutely demolishes anything and everything, and you would not need to go farther than that. You basically, what I'm saying, the long and short of it is, you would never need to S6 a character in Wuthering Waves. There are many reasons you might want to C6 a character in Genshin Impact. Most people can't afford to do that, but to C6 a character in Genshin Impact is to be able to clear Dire. It's tough to clear Dire without at least one C6 character on the team. And then if you add into that the pull economy, which is affording low spenders a better chance to get to S2, versus it is virtually impossible to get a C2 character in Genshin Impact on one banner. There is almost no way a free-to-play account is getting C2 in 3 weeks. There is just no way that's happening. So the pull economy makes it so that this is even more lopsided, right? You need a higher constellation on average to clear the same level of content. And again, when I say clear, I'm talking about max rewards, you know, the weapon skins and the feathers and all that, versus a lower sequence node and higher pulls per patch. So all this stuff is tilting the scales in the direction of Wuthering Waves, other than that initial early point I made about the 4 stars. The banners, the difference in pity system, which is just another point on top of the pull economy, on top of the lack of necessity to go deep down any character's resonance chain. The weapon being guaranteed. The weapon also is more mandatory in Wuthering Waves for most SIG units. Genshin Impact tends to have more free-to-play weapon options, which they kind of have to because the weapon banners like hard pity is actually 240. So that's kind of crazy. No, there's no way free to play accounts can get weapons. Yeah, like ever. So, and then the standard weapon and character being also guaranteed upon selection. Meanwhile, in Genshin, you're not even guaranteed to ever get standard 5-star weapons, and some of which are pretty good. Some are not, but some are pretty good. And but at least in Wuthering Waves, if you do want to use a standard weapon on certain limited characters and not pull every SIG weapon, you at least know that you can choose the weapon and just pull until you get it, right? And now, if we just take a brief look here before I wrap it up, comparing Genshin and some of these complaints to other gacha games, because I think the larger point that I'm trying to make is that Hoyoverse is going to have to make some changes because and start to be a little bit more forgiving and generous, because if they don't, and if they're not, there's just too much competition now. You have 3 games that I have played in the last 2 months that have all released in the last 3 months. Enfield came out in late January. Stardive came out about a month ago, and NTE about 2 weeks ago. And all 3 of these games have come out to critical acclaim. And if we look at Enfield, one could argue that the banner system is maybe worse than Genshin in some ways there, with the guarantee not carrying over. The pity system is really weird and not super. It's sort of ambiguous when you first start playing. They don't make it very clear, but basically the character's guaranteed within 120 pulls. But if you're closer to pity, then there's a chance that you could go beyond the 80 pulls. It's complicated. And it was one of the reasons that I actually stopped playing the game overall, was that this game, Mongol Stardive, actually has been one of the most generous games that I've played thus far. You can find my review for it on my channel. I did a review a couple days after it released, so it would have been, I don't know, 3 weeks ago maybe. And one of the things that jumped off the page at me was that just how many rewards were in this game. They just kept on flying in. And as I was just playing the game earlier today and was like still shocked at, wow, I can't believe how generous this game is. It's insane. Just there were bam, 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 Starlight Crystal, Starlight, and it just kept coming. So, and Everness to Everness has kind of been the same way. The at launch rewards are quite handsome, and I would say that I kind of forgot with Genshin Impact, but I started playing on a second account and couldn't believe, compared to these other games that we've been talking about, how few rewards there are in early game for early players. And then you couple that with the fact that there are no universal supports that are easily accessible early on. Unless you get lucky and Bennett's on banner or Sucrose is on banner or something, you're cooked. You're like totally screwed. They don't give out a free Kazuha or something, which would at least somewhat alleviate the problem for early game players. So there's just a lot of things to be concerned about. And they're going to have to do something, because in the past, the game has been too big to fail, right? Too popular, and they know that they can just continue to take advantage of their player base, and nobody's going to stop playing the game because it's such a great game and they had no competition, right? Except their other titles. Now, in the last 2 years, you have at least 3 games that are quite popular now: WuWa, Enfield, and NTE, and then Stardive to a lesser degree because they're only available on mobile and PC. They're not out on console yet, which who knows how many people actually play these games on console. I don't know, but it seems like that game has been met with a pretty warm reception as well. So potentially 4 games made by other devs that are doing well and are eating up a piece of that gacha sphere pie. And so Hoyo is losing their grip on the gacha war, and they're going to lose it if they don't make some changes. One thing that they do in their other titles, they are a lot more generous in ZZZ and HSR. Now, I don't play either of those games, so I can't give you a firsthand experience, but what I know is Genshin is the game that is the least forgiving. And even the other little things like the time gated stuff that people are just so sick of, you know, they don't have that in ZZZ. And everyone's like, well, why have they not gotten rid of that in Genshin yet? So the problem is they don't listen to their community who is fed up with this stuff. So yeah. Anyways, time will tell whether they will listen and take things in another direction or not. But for those of you that are strictly Genshin players, here's some ideas for other games that you can try if you're starting to get fed up yourself with some of the things that Hoyoverse has been doing. Here's some options, right? Wuthering Waves, Enfield, NTE, Stardive, all fantastic games as well, in their own right and in their own way. So anyways, that's what I have for you guys today. Thank you all so much for joining me. Please remember to subscribe and follow the channel, and we will catch you on the next one. Have a good one.